Iska was an overpowered swordsman who got thrown in prison for sparing his enemies. However, everything changes when he's given a chance to redeem himself by defeating the powerful enemy princess, but he gets rizzed up by her melons and betrays his country to clap her instead. This story starts when humanity's greatest empire starts attacking and locking up people who have the power to use magic. To counter this, the mages build a separate nation called the Nebulous Sovereignty, leading to a 100-year-long war between the two nations. Meanwhile, Iska, the strongest soldier of the empire, mysteriously frees an enemy mage and helps her escape, so he's stripped of his rank and tossed in jail for treason. 1 year later, Iska is released again. But he must earn his freedom by defeating the most powerful mage in the sovereignty, called the Ice Calamity Witch. Iska accepts the mission with the condition that they assemble his old team. Much later, he gets together with his team consisting of Jin, Nene, and their captain Mismis, who brief him on the mission in the front lines. After making it to the base, they decide to head straight to the front lines to help the other soldiers. On the way there, Iska and Jin sense an attack coming, so they all jump right before an astral blast hits the truck. After the attacking mages reveal themselves, Iska drops the leading mage and his assistant, but then an earth golem appears, thanks to an overpowered mage named Rin. She promises to make their death painless, but Iska is already tired of her nauseating face, so he drops the golem before telling the others to go help the soldiers on the front line. After they leave, Rin regenerates the golem and resumes her attack, but Iska easily dodges every single one while demanding to know where the Ice Calamity Witch is. Rin refuses to talk and keeps attacking, so Iska gets close enough for a fatal strike and tries to end her. The next moment, he notices a thick fog rolling in and senses someone powerful, so he jumps back before the infamous Ice Calamity Witch, Alice, reveals herself. After taking the entire forest back to the Ice Age, Alice thanks Rin for stalling and destroys the reactor powering Iska's camp. She then tells Iska to surrender because she is obviously too powerful for a puny swordsman, but Iska remains determined to capture her, so she creates an ice wall to crush him. After Iska easily jumps over it, Alice unleashes a barrage of icicles until he gets cut, but then he replicates the same skill, so she creates a shield to block it and struggles to understand how he did that. As he continues attacking, the wannabe Elsa jumps back and asks why he is so persistent, so Iska explains how determined he is to end the war between their countries. Surprised, Alice says she also wants to achieve world peace before suddenly slipping off the ice. Iska catches her, but she gets flustered and jumps off him, promising to defeat him, and before taking off on her giant pet bird. Several hours later, Alice is back in the Sovereignty, still thinking about the fact that Iska shares her dream for world peace. To distract herself, she spends the next day at an opera house in the neutral city, where fighting is prohibited. Once there, she starts soaking up her napkin with tears, but a random gentleman gives her a new one. After the play, she tries to thank him, only to see that it's Iska. Several hours before this, Mismis noticed that Iska was feeling down, so she gave him tickets for the play to cheer him up. Much later, he was in his seat at the opera house, trying to enjoy the play, when Alice started flooding her seats with tears. He then offered his napkin, thinking she was just a regular crybaby. In the present, Alice loses it and challenges Iska to another duel, but Rin reminds her that combat is strictly forbidden in this city. She then accuses Iska of stalking her, but he says she would have noticed him if she weren't such an emotional crybaby. Alice gets pissed off again, but Rin manages to stop her from turning the entire place into an ice skating rink. Alice finally leaves to keep the peace, and after walking around the city for a couple of minutes, she and Rin find a spot to have lunch. Unfortunately, the entire place has been booked out by guests, so the waiter decides to let them use a reserved table until the customer shows up. Moments later, she returns with Iska, and this time, Rin is the one who loses it. She thinks he actually wants the smoke, but after he explains that he booked the table before the play, Alice tells her to cool off because they don't have another option. Rin still rejects the idea of eating with an enemy, so Alice explains that leaving just because of him would make them look weak. With that, they decide to stay, and Iska quickly places his order. Shockingly, he orders the same thing as Alice, and they suddenly start bonding over their shared love for pasta while Rin regrets tagging along. Eventually, she gets tired of the yapping and makes Alice focus on her food so they can leave. When they finally get back to the palace, Rin tells Alice to forget about everything that happened. Alice then decides to hold onto Iska's napkin, so Rin reminds her that he is probably the most powerful enemy they have ever faced. Alice then argues that she also sees him as the enemy, but after Rin leaves, she still keeps the napkin with her. While she struggles to fall asleep, Iska is already in a dream where he recalls the day his bus got attacked by lizards. He was just about to get murked when a girl who looked a lot like Alice helped him. The following day, he joins the rest of the team for a training session, and after Ms. weak body forces her to take a break, a chick named Rizz shows up to inform them that she will be leading the next mission. After making sure Iska is okay, she gives him tickets to an art exhibition and tells him to take the edge off with that instead of some stupid play. Around the same time, Alice goes to see her mother, Millever, who also warns her about Iska. Millever then shows her a crystal formation used to keep the founder of the sovereignty, who is also the twin sister of the Grand Witch who almost burned down the entire empire. Millever explains that the crystal formation started cracking after Alice's fight with Iska, and Alice recalls how strange Iska's astral art was. Millever once again tells her to stay away from Iska at least until they figure out who he really is. Minutes later, Alice meets Rin and says she plans to go out again because she has trouble sleeping. Rin immediately opposes the idea of going into the neutral city, but Alice promises to go somewhere completely different just to avoid Iska. Minutes later, Alice bumps into the one guy she was supposed to avoid and immediately blames him for always being outside when he should be training like an actual soldier. After Iska also asks why she is coming all this way just to see the work of an artist from the imperial capital, he suggests walking together since they are going to the same place, but Alice refuses. To nobody's surprise, she gets lost and eventually makes her way back to the fountain before Iska returns and offers to help her again. Surprised, she reminds him that they are enemies, in case he forgot, but Iska still insists on seeing the exhibition together. His Rizz game easily folds her like a lawn chair, so they end up watching the entire exhibition together and yapping the entire time. Afterwards, she buys him a drink to appreciate the help, but then Iska uses her royal milkers as his pillow. Hours later, Rizz gets frustrated by the amount of work she has to do, but then Iska pulls up with drinks for everyone. The next moment, Risha calls in to check on her before telling Iska to head out for a meeting with the Senate. Moments later, he gets there, and they commend him for scaring Alice off the other day, but he refuses to accept the praise since she still destroyed the reactor. After reminding him that they only wanted him to fight Alice, they promise to reinstate him as a saint disciple, but he has to defeat her the next time they clash. Minutes later, Iska is back in his room, thinking about the time he spent with Alice. He then calls Miss to tell her that he will be skipping training tomorrow for a personal matter in the neutral city. Miss gets curious and asks what this is about, but he still claims it's nothing, so she decides to tag along. Around the same time, Rin finds Alice and explains how Iska was well respected in the Empire as the youngest saint disciple before his arrest. Alice gets surprised and asks why they have never heard of him, so Rin reminds her that his arrest happened over a year ago. She then gives Alice an old paper showing that Iska got arrested for freeing a mage from the Empire prison. Alice gets shocked again and tells Rin to find the mage he freed so she can figure out his intentions. Minutes later, Millever shows up at her room, so she quickly hides Iska's napkin. Millever then explains how the Empire used to hunt witches like deer and says nothing good can ever come from getting close to them. She also tells Alice not to spend her time or money on art from the Empire and heads out. This triggers something in Alice, so she calls Rin and asks to be escorted to the neutral city tomorrow because she wants to figure out Iska's true intentions once and for all. The next day, while driving to the neutral city, Miss asks Iska about this personal business he has refused to explain, but all he says is that he needs to figure something out. Just then, Miss spots an albatross flying overhead and starts geeking out, but Iska already knows who that is, so he tells her to speed up. Minutes later, they get to the water fountain where Rin and Alice have been waiting. However, Miss doesn't know who Alice is yet, so she asks Iska for an explanation. When Alice introduces herself, Miss freaks out and almost pisses her pants, so Alice suggests taking their conversation outside the city. Once there, she brings up Iska's arrest and asks why he would free a mage from the sovereignty. Iska says he just felt pity since she was so young, but Alice gets confused and asks why he attacked her in the forest if he was willing to get locked up for a mage. Rin also demands an answer, so Iska says that nothing has changed about his ultimate goal for both their nations. He wants to end the war with a peace negotiation, but since the sovereignty and his commanders at the Empire have refused to consider it, he was going to kidnap a purebred mage like Alice to force the sovereignty to respond. Alice immediately tells him to forget about it because her mum would hardly flinch if he actually pulls it off. She further admits to being surprised that someone like him exists in the Empire. All of a sudden, she orders him to serve her and denounces loyalty to the Empire for a clean slate with the sovereignty. While Miss tries to make sense of their conversation, Rin tells Alice that Millever and her sisters would never approve of this, but Alice simply doesn't care. The next moment, they feel a tremendous release of power as the sky above literally cracks open.
Ah, shit! Here you go again!
As they watch, Grand Witch Nebulous flies out of the crack, and Miss immediately accuses Alice of setting them up. Alice says she is just as confused, but then Nebulous unleashes a series of blasts to obliterate Iska and Miss. By then, Millever has just noticed the sudden power surge, so she runs down and gets shocked to see that Nebulous has woken up. This excites her because it means she will finally destroy the Empire. On the other hand, Alice and Rin have also been knocked down by Nebulus's attack, so Miss asks why she is also attacking mages. Alice and Rin figure that this must be some sort of reaction to whatever power woke Nebulus from her slumber. Regardless, Alice expresses her annoyance at this situation because she wanted to finally settle things with Iska. She admits to feeling all warm and fuzzy after they first met and says it is the main reason she wanted to figure him out today. As she then tells Nebulus to chill, the Grand Witch calls her a traitor and immediately attacks, but Rin rushes in and protects Alice from the blast. However, she gets knocked out by the immense heat, and Alice panics, so Iska reminds her to use her ice powers before telling Miss to take Rin to a hospital. As soon as Miss leaves with Rin, he pulls out his swords to face Nebulus, but she immediately recognizes the swords as Master Crosswell's. Iska asks how she knows him, but she responds by attacking, so they both join forces to counter. Despite this, Nebulus easily overpowers them and unleashes a dreadful wind skill, so Iska grabs Alice's arm and says they have to trust each other since they both have the same goal. Alice agrees, so they merge their powers for a second attack on Nebulus. After she smacks Alice across the ice like a ping-pong ball, Iska speeds up to get closer, but Nebulus immediately turns her attention to him. Alice then creates endless stairs of ice and uses the last of her energy to protect Iska until he cuts off Nebulus's wings. With that, she falls back into the crack in space. Iska then rejects Alice's offer to serve him, but they both agree to a truce for today since they have no energy left to fight each other. A couple of nights after this, Iska takes yet another L in the casino, so Jin suggests packing it up before he makes them homeless. However, Miss tells him not to give up and runs off to find more money, while Nena asks why they are even here to begin with. A couple of days before this, Rizz had told Miss to take the entire team out because it would be their last chance to have fun before working under her for a super important mission. When Miss asked what the mission was about, Rizz responded with a smile and ran off. Back in the present, Miss returns and admits that she feels skeptical because the mission might be their very last one, which is why Rizz decided to give them one last vacation. Jin then tells her to stop sweating the small stuff because they are all going to kick the bucket eventually. He then asks why she even chose this spot for the vacation, so Miss tells them about the latest battle tank. Nena gets excited because she also knows a little about tanks, so Miss says she is planning to get the tank with their winnings. That way, they have a good shot at surviving the mission. While they all commend her delusion and head back to the games, Rin shows up with Alice and excitedly explains how throwing money away on gambling games is the best way to live as a princess. Rin doesn't care about all this and says she just wanted to go to the neutral city, but Rin asks if she is just looking for a chance to see Iska again. Alice immediately denies it and says she is just trying to take him down. But Rin already knows that she just wants a chance to get cracked. Rin then says she can do that during an actual battle, so they head inside and fail to notice Iska, who has still managed to fail at every single game. After Rin finds a machine for Alice and tells her to aim for victory, Alice recalls her plan to fight Iska and starts looking for a perfect date for it. As she wonders what days Iska will be free, Rin asks if she is planning for a duel or a wedding. Alice once again denies ever thinking of Iska in that way and claims she just wants to take him down, but Rin is already tired of the excuses, so she starts the game. Moments later, Alice hears weird noises from the machine and asks Rin what it is. Turns out she just got the jackpot, so Rin runs off to find the staff while people gather to look. Just then, Nena gets close to congratulate Alice, and when she mentions that a prize like this would help Miss achieve her goal, Alice gives her some of the winnings. Nena gets surprised and asks if she is serious, so Alice explains that she doesn't really need it. Nena then heads back to the others and explains what happened. Miss immediately regains her confidence, but Jin tells her to save it until she can actually win a jackpot by herself. Nena then explains what Alice looked like, but Iska refuses to believe that it was actually her. Several minutes later, Alice is on the way out with Rin when she spots a card-reading place. Curious, she goes in alone and asks the lady when she will meet a special guy. The lady asks if it's her boyfriend, but Alice freaks out. So she starts the reading and says her special guy is always close by. Alice then meets Rin outside and says she didn't get the answer she wanted, and so they continue walking. Just then, Iska also sees the place and decides to get a reading done. Once inside, he makes the same request, and when the lady asks where he met this special someone, he starts yapping about everything he has done with Alice. Unfortunately, the lady quickly gets bored and proceeds to shuffle the deck of cards before saying the same thing she told Alice. Around the same time, Risha gets summoned by the higher-ups for a meeting. Turns out, a new vortex just opened at the border, and they want her to get Iska's team down there as soon as possible. The following day, Iska returns from the mini vacation with everyone else, so Rizz calls in to cancel their regular mission before telling them about the vortex at the border. The first time a vortex formed, Nebulous was created, as well as the power every mage uses. There is a high chance the Sovereignty will attack for this new one, so it's their job to defend the vortex. Meanwhile, Alice is currently trying to enjoy her fantasies about Iska's meat saber, but then Rin shows up to tell her about the vortex. She gets surprised because there is a royal family whose sole purpose is to inform them of such high-level incidents. Rin then says they are probably trying to keep all that power to themselves by not telling anyone. Barely an hour later, they show up at the Zoa family's house, and Rin suddenly senses someone before stopping a masked man's attack. He claims he was just messing with them, but Alice asks why he still hides his face behind a mask. He ignores this and tells her that the vortex is nothing to get all flustered about, but Alice refuses to believe him and says she has to see it for herself. The next day, at the Empire Army's base, Miss meets up with the rest of the gang to discuss a meeting she had with the higher-ups. As she explains how they kept ranting about incomplete reports, they try to sympathize with her, but then she spots an old friend and calls her over. After they both lock melons in a steamy hug, Miss introduces Noro, who then says the only thing different about her is the massive racks on her chest. Miss gets embarrassed and tries to defend her midget status, but they all get summoned for an address from a soldier called Nameless. After they all line up, Miss gets intimidated by Nameless' aura while Iska explains that he is actually a saint disciple. Nameless, they say their only mission is to either capture the vortex before the Sovereignty or destroy it completely. He further states that no one is allowed to stand in his way as he is prepared to do anything to win. With that, the mission begins, and after hours of pointlessly searching, Miss gets a call from Noro, who says that 3 of their units have gone missing. Worried, Miss suggests heading back to base camp for new orders, but Nameless tells them to continue the mission because 3 missing units are not enough reason to stop. As Nene and Jean complain about how unfair the order is, Iska decides to go ask questions since he and Nameless were once colleagues. However, as soon as he enters the mission control room, they ask for his rank and call him dumb for coming without his captain. Thankfully, Nameless recognizes him, but instead of hearing Iska's question, he calls him a traitor and says he has no right to ask questions. Feeling defeated, Iska considers leaving B, but then Miss walks in and offers to speak in his place instead, which surprises him. Much later, Iska tells Jin and Nene that Nameless refused to give Miss an answer, and as they discuss the possibility of a secret operation, Miss opens the bath without realizing that her plots are exposed. Nene immediately glazes her, but she gets embarrassed and tells Jin to take responsibility. Around the same time, Alice pulls up to a top-secret mage outpost, and all the station guards get shocked to see her. They explain that the area is off-limits, but she ignores this and heads straight to the vortex. Just then, the masked man shows up, so she asks if he plans to keep all this power for his own benefit. After claiming that he just discovered it and was about to come tell Miliver, the masked man introduces them to a fun-sized chick named Kissing. He tells Kissing that Alice is her relative, but she gets shy and hides behind him. He then apologizes for making her uncomfortable and assures Alice that Kissing Jing is more than enough to protect the vortex. Alice doubts this and asks if she is really that strong, so the masked man says Kissing might even surpass her in power. Alice agrees that this might be possible, but still wants to know why he is trying to hoard all this power. When she asks if he plans to start a war with the Empire, the masked man admits to it and says it's what every mage has wanted for the last century. Meanwhile, Miss and the others stop at a location close to the vortex because they just started getting readings of an astral art from base camp. After Miss confirms the reading from Mission Control, Jin says it's probably the mages who kidnapped the 3 missing units. After Mission Control decides to move to a second base and tells them to keep searching for the vortex, Miss takes a minute to look around before deciding to go towards the very obvious stream of astral energy. Nena gets excited and says they might get rewarded for finding it first, but Jin tells her to relax because another team just pulled up. After seeing that it's Noro's team, Miss runs over to hug her, and when Noro asks if they saw the astral light, Miss gladly says yes. After saying that they shouldn't have looked, Noro explains how the Sovereignty set up traps in the valley to capture any Empire troop that gets too close. This is how the 3 missing units got kidnapped. The next moment, she grabs Miss and stops Jin and Iska from attacking before ripping off a skin patch to reveal her mage insignia. After the rest of her team does the same, Miss asks what she did to the real Noro, but then Noro grabs her neck and says it has always been her before frying Miss from the inside. Before Jin and Iska can react, Noro's entire team gets dropped by Nameless, who then reveals himself and claims he already knew about her. After saying that she can't get unalive here alive, Noro takes off with Miss, and when Nameless tries to cut them both, Iska blocks the attack. Kay and Jin fires a tracking device onto the back of the truck. After Noro takes off, Iska asks Nameless if he was really about to murk Miss Me. And Nameless asks if he wants to go back to prison, because going against a superior officer can be considered treason. Jin then says there is no point in arguing since they are already tracking the truck. However, Nameless ignores this and says they will blow up the entire vortex even if Miss is still there. A couple of minutes later, Alice is still wondering what the Masked Lord is up to when they hear word of Noro's return. Alice goes to check it out and gets surprised to see Miss, while Rin knocks her out to stop her from yapping. Alice then decides to go fight Iska at his base camp, and when Rin tries to talk her out of it, she insists that it might be her best chance to fight him. Meanwhile, Iska and the others have just found the outpost, so he tries to come up with a plan to save Miss before Nameless launches the missile strike. The next moment, a missile lands several meters from the outpost, and Nene explains that they are still working on an accurate location for the main attack, which gives them roughly an hour to save Miss. With that, Nene drives into the outpost, and while she distracts the regular mages, Iska rushes in to save Miss, only to run into Noro. She immediately attacks, but he easily blocks it, so Kissing decides to take over. Noro gets excited and thanks her for coming to help, but Kissing ignores her and uses her astral art to completely erase a second missile from existence. While Noro starts glazing like a Taylor Swift fan on coke, Iska realizes that he has to bring his A game to win this fight, so he cuts the cuffs on Miss and tells her to stay back. On the other hand, Rin has just completed her search on the First Empire base, so she tells Alice, who then decides to leave. Just then, Rin senses a slight movement close by, so she shoves Alice and gets cut by Nameless. After he reveals himself and commends Rin, Alice apologizes in advance and says she is about to take her anger out on him since she couldn't meet a certain someone. At the same time, Kissing gets surprised that Iska dodges her first attack, so she scatters her thorns across the cave and fires them in his direction. As they easily pierce through dense sheets of metal, Iska easily blocks them like toothpicks until he gets close enough to her. Kissing gets shocked again and admits that he is a powerful opponent. However, instead of giving up, she reconstructs the missile and detonates it right above Iska's head. Back at the base, Alice manages to force Nameless back with her abilities and unleashes a flurry of icicles to turn him into an ice kebab. However, he easily evades each one before sending the last two right back to her. After Rin throws herself in front of Alice again, Nameless calls Alice a backwater version of Elsa because she can't shoot straight. The rage bait works as Alice turns the entire base into an ice skating rink, but Nameless has already dipped by then. The next moment, the missile goes off, but Iska survives it and asks Kissing how she acquired such a dangerous ability. She responds by summoning a dragon made of thorns, but Iska charges in and finally knocks her out. Seeing this, Noro dips, so Miss runs towards Iska, but he suddenly moves to dodge an attack from the masked man. As Iska watches in shock, he grabs Kissing and promises to come back before throwing Miss into the vortex. Iska immediately jumps in for Miss, and Alice also joins him to complain about how she spent the entire day searching for him. She offers to help, but he has to agree to a duel afterwards. Naturally, Iska accepts, so she tries to get them out, but then the vortex implodes. Minutes later, Alice wakes up on the other side of the plains, and Rin immediately checks to make sure she is okay. Meanwhile, Jin and Nene find Iska and ask how he made it out with Miss. Several days later, Alice reminisces about the way she held his hand while they were spinning in the vortex. When Rin shows up, she denies even thinking of him, but Rin is already fed up with all the lies, so she suggests heading back to the neutral city. She says it would be best if Alice finally gets the duel she's been looking for from him. While Alice gets excited to see him again, Rin shares the sentiment, but she just wants to get this over with. Around the same time, Miss apologizes to Jin for being completely useless and making their team look like dummies. Iska and Nene tell her not to worry about it since they never expected the attack, but Jin insists that she was actually pathetic during the battle. He's especially pissed off that she stood there like a brain-dead mannequin and let the masked man shove her into the vortex. Miss then apologizes to Iska for putting him in such great danger. When Nene asks if he is actually okay, he says they have nothing to worry about and tells Miss to stop begging already. The next moment, she grabs her insignia. So Nene offers to get an ice pack if she is in pain, but Miss says it just feels weird. Right then, Rizz shows up and tells them that the super important mission is to sneak into the sovereignty and basically kidnap Queen Nebulous. Naturally, they are all surprised and wonder if she had too much to drink. Iska especially gets worried, so Rizz asks why, because he usually likes impossible missions. Iska explains that while he enjoys the occasional near-death experience, this is definitely way out of their league. They then ask how she plans to get past the sovereignty border because they use mage insignias as a passport to identify their citizens. Rizz recalls that it was actually the Empire that created a system to identify mages with their insignia. After the Great War and witch trials, the sovereignty gained independence and started using that same system to keep Empire citizens and spies out. Risha tells them not to worry about this because Mission Control has already created a plan to sneak them in. However, she refuses to explain what that plan is and says they will find out during the mission. A few days later, Rin and Alice show up at the fountain to wait for Iska again. Soon enough, Alice gets fed up because they have been showing up to see Iska for 3 days straight. After giving it some thought, Rin says that he probably didn't make it out of the vortex. Alice refuses to accept this and suggests splitting up so they can cover more ground. While she heads in the other direction, Rin wonders why she is not worried about the upcoming elections. She knows that Alice's sisters and a bunch of other noble families will be aiming for the throne, but since Alice only cares about Iska, she promises to help Alice get over her obsession. On the other hand, Iska and the rest of the gang continue wondering what this mission plan is. The next moment, Nena notices that Mismis is still scratching her arm and asks if she is really okay. Mismis says it's nothing again, but Jin asks if she got rashes from sleeping too much. As Mismis gets embarrassed and tells him to stop making things up, Iska tells Nena to get some meds just in case she has a bug bite. However, the moment Mismis takes off her shirt, they all freeze in shock because she has an insignia. Mismis sees it too, but her brain fractures, so she asks if they have ever seen such a weird-looking bug bite before. After trying to rub it off to no avail, she assures them that it's not what it looks like, but then Iska grabs her and says they still trust her before asking if she knows where it came from. When Jin says that she was probably possessed by the astral spirit during the vortex explosion, she loses it. While she experiences her first existential crisis, Jin and Nina talk about what life as a captured traitor would look like for her. Thankfully, Iska tells her not to worry and promises to keep her insignia secret from everyone if she is not ready to turn herself in. After Jin and Nena also promise to do the same, Mismis gets emotional and asks how they are so easily giving up their freedom for her. While she bawls her eyes out, Alice returns home frustrated, but when Rin suggests giving up the search for him, she starts bringing up other locations they haven't even explored in the neutral city. A couple of hours later, Jin and Nene show up at Iska's room to figure out a plan to hide the insignia so Mismis can continue living as usual. They spend a couple of minutes trying to think of a solution and eventually realize how much danger she's in because the Empire could go as far as executing her if they find out. As they continue brainstorming, Iska spots an old ticket for the art exhibition in the neutral city, so he decides to take her there for some fresh air. The next day, while walking through the neutrality, he explains that the entire world was actually united in the past. That was until astral energy was discovered, and the Empire grew scared of those who were granted abilities. After Iska promises to fight until she can freely live as herself, Mismis gets emotional again. As she then decides to go grab some drinks, Alice shows up in the city. Minutes later, Iska is still thinking of how insane the plan to kidnap Miliver is. He fails to realize that Alice is standing right in front of him until she asks to share the seat. She gets shocked to see him as well and explains how much effort she has put into searching for the last few days. When he tells her to sit, she refuses and says Rin would get upset at them for being together. He then offers to stand instead, but Alice also refuses this and eventually ends up sitting with him. When she asks what finally brought him back to the city, he claims it's nothing important, but Alice can tell that something's up. She asks again, but he still claims it's no big deal, so she tries to warp his mind with her milk jugs. Just then, Rin finally gets back, and Alice immediately acts like he was the one messing with her plot cannons. He tries to explain what really happened, but she doesn't really care and hands them both a drink. After Alice takes hers, he pops open his can and notices a strange smell, but still proceeds to drink it like a dummy. To nobody's surprise, he gets dizzy and falls unconscious. Rin then apologizes to Alice and claims she thought he would have noticed since he's so powerful. After she tosses him over her shoulders like a doll, Mismis shows up. Alice immediately tells her to relax, but she refuses and demands to know why they are breaking neutrality rules by kidnapping him. When Alice refuses to give an explanation, Mismis gets pissed off, and this forces a sudden release of astral energy from her arm. Alice immediately freezes her foot in place before taking off with Rin and Iska. Moments later, Risha hears about this, so she pays a visit to the Emperor to talk. Minutes later, Rin heads towards the capital city in a car, but Alice tells her to find another entrance because Iska won't be allowed to enter the capital city. While they head to another city, Risha starts a meeting with the Senate to discuss the Emperor's new decision to stop the infiltration of the sovereignty. After mentioning that several witnesses saw Rin driving towards the prison sector of the sovereignty, she reminds them that a demon who fought the Grand Witch in the past is being kept there. She even suggests setting the demon free so they can get an advantage in the war. After they all agree with her plan, she goes to see Jin and the girls, who are worried about Iska and desperately want to save him. Risha claims she's also working to get him free. but then she opens up a box filled with capsules of astral energy. Seeing the confusion on their faces, she uses one of the capsules to give Nene an insignia before explaining that it's the perfect way to sneak into the sovereignty to save him. When she tosses one over to Jin, he walks over to Miss and acts as if he used it on her just to keep her secret hidden. After she helps him get his insignia as well, Risha explains the plan for them to sneak into the prison sector and free Iska, while other soldiers will create a diversion so they can escape and capture Alice's mom. Meanwhile, Rin has just driven into the prison sector, and after telling her to head straight for their hotel, Alice starts playing with Iska, who is still knocked out. Just as she decides to control herself, Rin hits the brakes to save a cat, but this makes Iska fall into Alice's golden globes. She immediately shoves him away, but then he wakes up, so she starts arguing with Rin about the dosage she used to spike his drink. When Alice tries to blame Iska for comfortably taking a drink offered by his enemy, he calmly expresses how disappointed he is and says he thought the Ice Calamity Witch was more than a sneaky weakling. As the girls begin an argument over who is to blame, Jin and the girls manage to get into the prison sector, and as he heads towards the place Iska should be kept, Rizz pays close attention to them. Several minutes later, Rin finally makes it to the hotel, and after opening the door, she tells Iska not to try anything funny because getting exposed could mean execution for him. As soon as they get inside, Alice decides to relax, so Rin offers to take Iska to a special room she made just for him, but Alice stops her and says she is just looking for an excuse to torture him. Once again, Rin reminds her that Iska is the enemy, and he might finally try to split her vanilla buns in the middle of the night. After Iska claims he has never even thought about that, Rin decides to just watch over him instead, so Alice heads into her presidential suite to chill. On the other hand, Rizz calls the rest of the gang to ask about their mission progress, so Jin explains how the entire sector is filled with prisons. Rizz then guides them to the secret spot she has been watching from, but they get confused about how she made it into the sovereignty all on her own. However, before they can ask any questions, she claims to know where Iska is being kept, which makes them intrigued. Around the same time, Rin tells Iska that Alice is the only one who cares about keeping him alive. The next moment, she grabs a knife and cuts herself before explaining her master plan to make it look like he attacked first and gave her no choice but to deliver a life-ending strike. She immediately launches an attack, so Iska starts dodging while trying to talk his way out of this situation. While Iska fights for his life, Alice is thinking of new ways to get along with him, but she eventually stops the delusion and heads back out, only to see Rin trying to unalive her man. After he spots Alice and tells Rin, she refuses to believe and thinks he's only trying to distract her, until Alice grabs her shoulder and asks if this is how she planned to watch over him. By then, Jin and the girls have finally made it into a prison facility, but they notice that Risha didn't follow them and get curious about it. Jin starts suspecting that Mission Control doesn't really care about Iska. Meanwhile, Alice has just come up with a brilliant idea to strap herself to Iska. She tells Rin to leave with the keys. That way, he has no chance of escaping. After she leaves, Iska asks Alice how she plans to sleep or use the ladies' room for the rest of the night, and she finally realizes just how stupid she has been. She immediately calls for Rin until she returns and separates them. While Alice heads to the bath, Rin watches over Iska again, but this time she doesn't try to cut his head off. When he asks for the plan they've made for him, Rin explains how he will get locked up forever. Right then, Alice returns with her buns swinging in the wind, so Iska turns away to avoid waking his lightsaber. When he notices the large insignia on her back, she asks what he thinks of it, but also notices the concerned look on Rin's face. Alice assures her that she's just curious about what he thinks. Then Iska says he knows a certain team captain from the Empire who is actually a mage. After he promises to protect her with his life and says he doesn't judge people by their powers or the nation they were born into, Alice asks what he thinks when her name pops up in his mind. When Iska says she's just an opponent he has to defeat, her heart glitches as she never expected a guy like him to completely ignore the fact that she is a princess. Shocked, Rin verbally abuses him for acting like the princess is a regular girl, but Alice stops her and says she has always wanted a guy who doesn't treat her like some prize. However, when he suddenly tells her to stop flashing her jugs in his face, she gets embarrassed and tries to attack him. Meanwhile, Rizz has just entered a special cell, where a demon named Salinger stays. As she starts drooling over his hot body, he gets tired of the creepy staring and asks how she managed to break into the prison. Rizz then explains that she had specific arrangements for his escape and offers to grant him freedom if he supports the Empire's plan to capture Milliver. After taking some time to think about it, Salinger decides that the outside world might be more interesting after all this time, so he blasts his way out. Meanwhile, Alice is currently with Iska at the hotel, asking why he can't sleep. After he claims to be enjoying the view, she says that a lot of the buildings he's looking at are prison facilities used to house the sovereignty's most dangerous criminals. However, almost all of them have zero powers aside from the demon Salinger. Surprised, Iska asks why she calls him a demon, just like everyone else back at the Empire. Alice then says that although she doesn't like the disrespectful term, it's the only way to describe a mage who betrayed the sovereignty. She further asks him to keep this conversation secret from Rin, but then the psychotic dummy shows up and almost gives Alice a heart attack. When Rin says that security systems just detected Imperial soldiers in the sector, Alice tries to blame Iska, but he reminds her that they knocked him out hours ago. Rin then tells her not to worry about it since alarm systems have been triggered in all the prison facilities. At the time, Jin and the girl Shade also heard the alarms, but as they got scared that they had been caught, Jin said they are still safe because sovereignty soldiers would have surrounded them long ago if they already knew their location. The next moment, Nena tells them to be quiet because she can hear soldiers approaching, but this only makes Jin a lot more curious about what's happening in the prison. After a sudden explosion rocks the entire facility, Risha calls them and apologizes for getting Iska's location wrong before telling them to make every effort to escape. Jin immediately pulls out his blaster as the soldiers split up to find them. Meanwhile, Alice has also just seen the explosion, and Rin gets worried about Salinger's escape. Alice immediately starts to panic and says they have to stop him because he will be going after Miliver. After telling Rin to get the car, she apologizes to Iska for not being able to explain things before asking if he can help her. The next moment, she tells him not to worry and runs out. However, before they leave, she gives him a new napkin and apologizes for ruining the one he gave her in the opera. Around the same time, Jin and the girls find another spot to hide from the soldiers, but after realizing that escape would be impossible together, he tells them to wait for his signal so they can escape. Nene realizes what he's trying to do and offers to serve as bait instead. As they both argue over who gets to sacrifice themselves, Miss suddenly hands Iska's swords over and says she is tired of being the pathetic weakling of the group. She then exposes her insignia and rushes out to pose as an escaped prisoner. She threatens the guards, thinking they will comply, but they do the opposite, so she runs away while they chase after her. Just as they corner her and try to finish her off, Jin and Nena knock them out, but the fear of almost getting murked makes Miss bawl her eyes out. Around the same time, Iska gets fed up with his situation because he can only watch from the room. However, after hearing his phone ringing, he answers and hears Jin, who then explains what is going on. After he also tells them about what happened to him, Jin asks if he can leave the hotel, but he says it won't be possible thanks to the handcuffs Rin used to lock him down. The next moment, Iska realizes that Alice didn't just leave a random napkin, so he runs to the table and finds the key she hid inside it. While he tells Jin to find a way out, Alice's car gets attacked, so she jumps out with Rin right before it blows up. Seeing so much destruction in the sector pisses her off, so she freezes a large wall of fire before taking command of all the soldiers present. While she sends Rin to stop Salinger, Iska reunites with the rest of the gang, but after taking his swords, he tells them to wait behind the hotel and runs inside. By then, Rin has already found Salinger, and when he tries to melt her brain as he did with Rizia, she ignores it and promises to make him pay for betraying the sovereignty. Salinger explains that his status as a self-proclaimed king gave him the right to take as many spirits as he wanted, but she says all he will be getting is as much prison food as he wants. She then attacks with her ninja stars, but Salinger blocks them and pushes her back, so she summons her earth golem. Salinger easily destroys the golem, but Rin still tries to attack, so he uses the same earth skill to put her in her place. Despite being clearly outmatched, Rin tries to attack again, and even after he knocks her down, she tries to get close enough for an attack, so he decides to finish her off. Thankfully, Iska blocks his attack and steps up to protect her. Rin then tells Iska that he is trying to fight an extremely powerful demon who went against the Grand Witch on his own. Despite this, Iska says he is ready for some, but says she has to let him leave the city with Jin and the girls after he wins. Rin agrees, so Iska grabs both swords and Salinger responds by releasing a powerful astral art that startles Alice. She gets surprised by this, but also starts to realize why Alice can't get enough of him. After Iska says he's only doing this to get a free pass out of the city, Salinger is surprised that a soldier from the Empire is fighting against him, so he unleashes another powerful blast that sends his waves all the way to Alice. Around the same time, a butler of the palace sees Princess Sisbel outside by herself, so he tells her to come back in because the alarm systems are still on. When she asks what's going on, he explains the situation and says he only got concerned after hearing that Alice is also at the prison facility, leading soldiers to attack. By then, Salinger has just decided to finish Iska off with one attack, but after he slices right through it, Salinger stops to ask how, because while some powerful people have been able to block it, no one has ever sliced it. He is especially curious to know how Iska could see it. But then Rin realizes that Iska was watching the flames to figure out the attack's direction. Salinger also catches on and asks how he attains such strength, but Iska says he wasn't born with it, to dismiss any speculation of foul play. Salinger then commends him for not being completely useless like Rin, but when he tries to unleash another attack, Rin tells him what to expect. Salinger then blasts her away and tells her to stop interrupting the fun before blasting Iska again. Iska dodges this and finally gets closer enough for a brutal hit, but Salinger uses the wind skill to push him back before switching back to using earth spells. Despite this, Iska only uses the opportunity to get even closer, so Salinger starts chanting a powerful spell. Rin immediately tells Iska to jump away, and he does so right before the ground becomes a massive pool of magma. After Iska thanks Rin for helping him, she decides to try working together for once because they obviously can't survive alone. Salinger tells all them that this is worthless because they are still too weak to defeat him. On the other hand, Alice gives her soldiers orders, but then she suddenly hears Nameless and blocks his attack. He tells her to surrender because there is no way the sovereignty can win, but she is already hungry for a fight and challenges him. After he suddenly vanishes, Salinger unleashes one of his most powerful skills yet, and when Iska tries to cut through it, he gets hit with an enormous blast that almost turns him into steak. Curious, Rin asks Salinger if he only steals astral spirits to overpower his enemies, but then Salinger decides to tell her about his life's mission to merge humanity with astral spirits. She immediately promises to stop him, no matter what, but he barely flinches and asks how she can pull that off when her most powerful ally couldn't even withstand his basic fire art. Rin tells Salinger to stop being so cocky because Iska can't be defeated that easily. But Salinger refuses to believe this and decides to finish her off for capping. The next moment, Iska blocks his attack and unleashes one of his, but Salinger starts running up the beam while struggling to believe that he survived the blast. Iska then explains how he froze his entire body at the last second, but Salinger gets shocked and asks if he is actually insane because using such a dangerous art on himself could have ended his life. After Iska says he is determined to win at all costs, Salinger jumps to the highest point in the facility and decides to end everything with a special skill he has been cooking up in prison. After Rin summons a golem to protect Iska, Salinger decides to smoke her first, but as he releases lightning bolts on her, Alice freezes it completely and rushes over to help. Iska once again tries to attack, so Salinger converts his astral energy to swords for a counter, but Iska easily destroys them with his. The next moment, Salinger admits that Iska is powerful and promises to return again before falling into the underground prison for a quick escape. Much later, Rin finally gets patched up and tells Alice not to worry about the other prisoners, as they have all been escorted back into their respective facilities. Alice decides to go give her mom a report and reminisces on the smile Iska had on before he left. On the other hand, Nameless finally returns to the Empire, and it turns out to be none other than Risha in a suit. The real Nameless asks how her mission went and says she never even needed a suit, but she insists that it was a vital part of her mission in the sovereignty. After she says something about pleasing the 8th grade apostles, Nameless asks if she is giving a report to the Emperor, to which she says yes. Before that, she goes in for a meeting with the Senate, and they express excitement over what happened in the sovereignty before discussing a top-secret plan. Around the same time, Iska finally makes it out of the sovereignty with the girls, but Nena is still worried about him, so he assures her that he just feels tired after everything that happened. Miss is also worried about him, so he once again assures them that he's fine before asking about her insignia. She freaks out and says she completely forgot about it before begging them to help her find a solution. Around the same time, Alice returns to the palace and commends Rin for being so resourceful during the fight, but after recalling what happened, Rin admits that it was all thanks to Iska's help. All this talk about Iska makes Alice fantasize about being in the same room with him again. This time, Rin catches her in the act, but decides to let it slide because she's also warming up to Iska. As Alice excitedly asks if she can finally say his name whenever she wants, Princess Sisbel listens to the conversation and realizes that they're talking about the same guy who freed her from an Empire prison. She then prays to the gods to help her meet him again, so she can finally express her gratitude. Several minutes later, Risha changes and enters the Emperor's chamber along with Nameless to discuss what happened with Salinger. However, the Emperor, who is actually a cat hybrid named Yoon, tells her to forget about all the boring stuff because he only wants to talk about Alice and the fact that she is apparently obsessed with Iska. Around the same time, Sisbel experiences a dream where Miliver gets attacked, and as soon as she wakes up, she tries to go see her. However, after finding her busy with a bunch of politicians, Sisbel returns to her room. A couple of minutes after this, the butler shows up to tell her that Miliver has been asking for her, so Sisbel goes up to the throne room. Miliver then tells her to pay a visit to a city called Al-Samira to check if they have decided to support the sovereignty because they still have not pledged loyalty or neutrality. She offers to send some of her guards on the trip as well, but Sisbel tells her not to worry about that and heads back to her room, while a subject tells Miliver that her oldest daughter just returned. By then, Iska has just returned from a physical examination, and after he explains the process, Nana tells him that they all have to get examined again in a week to check on the temporary insignia from Rizz. He didn't notice that Miss is taking this news hard, but before he can check on her, Rizz gets dragged in by a girl named Michaela. Naturally, Miss gets concerned and asks if something happened, but Michaela says they have been working way too much because of Rizz's obsession with perfection, so she tells them all to take a 60-day break. After they leave, Miss gets excited because this break means they don't have to go for the examination. However, Jin reminds her that they still need a permanent solution, so Iska suggests going on a vacation during the break so they can brainstorm for ideas. While Nena suggests going to a resort very far from the Empire, Rin brings in a bunch of new paperwork for Alice to complete, but she gets frustrated and begs for some free time because she has been working all day long. Rin agrees with her and decides to stop the work before going to make her some tea. After she serves it, Alice brings up her older sister's return from a political campaign and decides to go check on her. On the way out, she runs into Sisbel, who then turns right back to avoid speaking with her. Rin immediately notes that Sisbel has been acting a lot strangely recently, but Alice says it's nothing to worry about since they are all stressed about the upcoming elections. She further explains that it basically decides which of them gets to take over from Miliver. By then, Sisbel had already gotten into her car for the trip Miliver was talking about. When her butler asks why she is refusing to take guards, she pulls up a conversation between the politician from before and another respectable figure just to show that no one in the palace or royal family has pure intentions. As soon as she leaves, the masked man who was watching this entire time heads back inside to greet the thickest baddie on the planet, named Elle. She's apparently the eldest daughter that everyone has been yapping about all day, and after he exchanges greetings, she tells him that there is someone in power who is currently working with the Empire against them. Naturally, the masked man gets curious to hear more, but she bounces her water balloons in his face and promises to tell him later. On the other hand, Iska and the rest of the gang have just pulled up to Alsamira for their vacation. When Miss tells him to blow up a floaty, he reminds her that he hasn't even checked into a hotel. Much later, she changes along with Nene and joins the guys on the beach before asking for their opinions on the swimsuit. A couple of hours later, Jin carries Miss because she apparently can't handle 2 shots. After Iska tells him to take her back to the hotel, he leaves, and Iska decides to go shopping for supplies with Nene, but she asks for a couple of minutes to use the ladies' room. As soon as she leaves, Iska bumps into Princess Sisbel and immediately tries to help her up, but then he recognizes her from the night at the Empire prison. Nena also gets back by then, so he tries to explain who Sisbel is, but she has already left. He then decides to focus on shopping, while Sisbel continues running until she reaches a safe distance. The butler, who has been chasing after her, finally catches up, and she excitedly tells him that she has finally found the hero who saved her all those years ago. While she continues freaking out, Alice tries to get some shut-eye, but then Rin reminds her that she has a meet and greet scheduled for the morning. Naturally, she tries to complain about this, but then Miliver shows up and tells them both to follow her. A couple of hours after this, Sisbel takes the butler back to the spot where she bumped into Iska and uses her astral art to pull up footage of exactly what happened after she ran off. Using this, she starts tracking, while Miliver takes Alice and Rin upstairs and says they need to figure out why she has been acting strangely lately. While all this is happening, Sisbel traces Iska's steps until they find the hotel. Around the same time, Miliver takes the girls into Sisbel's room, and as they all go through her stuff, Alice spots the newspaper about Iska's arrest and gets surprised along with Rin. By then, Sisbel has already found his room, but as she sneaks in to talk to him, he attacks, thinking she is an intruder. She then reveals who she truly is before asking him to follow her back to the sovereignty. After a brief pause, Sisbel introduces herself and tells Iska that she's not used to being pinned down by guys like him. While he immediately moves back and apologizes, Alice is currently freaking out because she now believes that Sisbel saw her having fun with Iska in the neutral city. Rin tells her not to worry because Sisbel's ability only allows her to see what's happening in places she has already been to or is very close to. After thinking about everything again, Alice says Sisbel probably heard their conversation the other night, and Rin also agrees with this since it's the only explanation they can come up with. Meanwhile, in Iska's room, Sisbel gets on his bed and apologizes for casually showing up before saying that she never got the chance to really thank him for saving her life. Sisbel then says she initially thought he was setting a trap for her that night. To show how grateful she is, she offers him a special bracelet, but Iska refuses this to save his aura points and acts like he isn't one fail away from becoming a prisoner again. When she tells him that people on both sides still recall that night, Iska asks if that is how she figured out his name, and she easily admits it before promising to return the favor one way or the other. After offering to reinstate his status as a saint disciple, Sisbel also promises to make sure he's always protected, but Iska has to agree to follow her back to the sovereignty. He immediately recalls that Alice gave him a very similar offer, so he asks who she really is and why she didn't choose someone from the countless subjects begging to stand by her side. She then claims to be a regular servant of the royal family and refuses to even consider going with someone else. However, after seeing how confused he is by all this, she promises to come back for a better conversation and heads out. She completely forgets the bracelet she brought along, so Iska grabs it and wonders what to do with it, while Rin drops to her knee to ask Miliver if she can send Alice to Alsamira as well, so he can have a conversation with Sisbel and figure out her relationship with Iska. While this is happening, Sisbel leaves the hotel and wonders why Iska didn't fold for her, as you simps would. Meanwhile, the Senate holds a meeting to talk about their plan for Sisbel because they also just heard about her trip to Alsamira. They then agree to use an enormous mage hunting suit to capture her. The next day, Miss gets excited because they can finally have barbecue for breakfast, but Jin gets tired of her yapping and tells her to zip it so they can actually decide on what to make. Miss then decides to help Nene, but that somehow leads to an argument over what to make first. When they try to get Iska's opinion, he barely responds because he is still thinking about Sisbel. Meanwhile, Elle has just met up with the masked man again to tell him that the traitors she was talking about are her own sisters. He immediately starts laughing and refuses to believe such a joke because it could potentially revoke her family's claim to the throne. Surprisingly, Elle insists that it's true and claims she doesn't care about who wins the election so long as the people of the sovereignty are protected. When the masked man asks why she has not already done something about this, Elle admits that being their older sister makes it difficult to do what is required. This is the entire reason why she decided to tell him. After giving it some thought, the masked man tells her not to worry because he can easily make sure her sisters are brought to justice. Several minutes later, Alice starts regretting her decision to go to Alsamira alone as the bus drives through the desert. Just as the bus attendant tries to explain their current location, the driver slams on the brakes and says he noticed some unusually large footprints. Alice immediately gets off and notices that the prints are heading straight towards the city. Over an hour later, Iska decides to get a new hotel. And when Miss asks why they are suddenly changing, he claims to have found a better spot when, in reality, he just wants to avoid Alice and her creepy sister at all costs. The next moment, Miss' sticker slips, and after Nene puts it back, she gets upset because they have yet to find a permanent fix. Jin then recalls how Nora was undetected for so long, so he suggests searching for the same kind of sticker she used because the Empire won't be able to tell the difference. By the time they finally get to the hotel, Iska tells everyone to settle in while he leaves to exchange currencies. Jin then takes his bag and watches as he carefully looks around the hotel and stops by a corner because Sisbel has managed to track him down again. Left with no choice, he agrees to speak with her, so they head somewhere private before he asks how she even found him in the first place. Sisbel then shows him her insignia and explains how she used her powers to replay the moment he made a reservation at this new hotel earlier on. Surprised, Iska asks why she would trust him with such information, but Sisbel goes a step further and tells him that she is actually one of the princesses from the royal family. His expression makes Sisbel ask if he doesn't believe her, but Iska is just trying to figure out why the princess of the sovereignty needs his help. Sisbel then says that someone from the royal family is planning to attack Miliver. She goes on to explain how her powers helped her discover the plot to instigate an all-out war between the sovereignty and the empire, during which they would destroy Miliver and the current royal family. While Sisbel continues explaining how important it is that Iska helps them, Alice makes it into the city and runs into Sisbel's butler, who then says he has been searching for her for hours. A couple of minutes after this, Sisbel is finally done yapping, so Iska calmly rejects her offer and says he only cares about creating peace between both nations. He doesn't want to get mixed up with Sisbel's toxic family issues, but she insists that he has to do something to help. The next moment, the masked lord shows up and claims to be disappointed in Sisbel for secretly plotting with an imperial soldier. Sisbel then tries to explain what is really happening, but he doesn't want to hear a word of it. After he orders his men to arrest her for treason, Sisbel runs off while Iska stops them and asks the masked man why he is going against one of his own. He says Sisbel no longer enjoys the protection of the sovereignty because she has betrayed them, but just as he tries to capture her again, the mage hunting robot shows up. They all get startled by it, but the masked man still gives the order to capture Sisbel. Seeing this, Iska tries to stop them, but the masked man distracts him using a teleportation skill. Iska still tries to fight, but the masked man tells him to give up because he doesn't have his swords. The next moment, Jin shows up with the girls and tells the masked man to stop yapping. Just then, Miss spots the masked lord, and after also recognizing her, he commends her on surviving the vortex explosion. The next moment, Android Godzilla scans them all for astral energy and immediately picks up Mismas. The masked man notices this and orders his soldiers to grab Sisbel before it can get to her. However, as they try to fight, it easily pounds them like smashed burgers. As it gets close to Sisbel and tries to attack, the masked man decides to intervene, but Jin stops him. He then explains that they only came to arrest Sisbel and want nothing to do with Empire dogs. Jin also says he only wants revenge for what happened to Mismas, so the masked man tells him to come get it before firing at them with fireballs. After dodging with Mismas, Jin reminds him that this is a neutral city where combat is strictly forbidden. The masked man then says he already plans to blame them for the attack after his soldiers send them to Valhalla. While his soldiers create a thick fog to hide their attacks, Iska protects Sisbel from Android Godzilla. Nene then says she needs time to shut it down, or it will send data about this battle to their superiors. Iska immediately starts fighting and almost ends up on a shirt, but he continues holding it back while Sisbel asks why he is going this far to protect her. Seeing him block such powerful attacks makes her crave one of his swords, but then Nene finally completes an electronic blast that completely fries Robozilla. Meanwhile, Jin and Mismas have just been backed into a corner, but he still manages to hold his own against the masked man. However, after teleporting his knife to another hand, the masked man cuts Jin, only to get a surprise bullet to the chest. He immediately jumps back and commends Jin's efforts before revealing that he only shot a recording device in his chest, which was meant to serve as proof of Sisbel's betrayal. As Mismas checks on Jin, the masked man starts dumping barrels of oil and says he wants to recreate the flames that destroyed the Empire long ago. Just as his soldiers try to ignite it, their flames get cut off by Mismas, who finally activates her power to save Jin. Before the masked man can respond to this, Jin shoots him in the head and breaks his mask, so he decides to dip just to hide his hideous face. By then, Iska has just sensed something from Robozilla, so he gets ready for another fight. However, after getting back up, it powers up its secondary energy source for a powerful blast. They all get confused since it should be completely out of juice, so Iska asks what its energy source is, but it suddenly releases the blast. They manage to duck just in time, and Nene immediately tries to fry it again, but she fails, so Iska tells her to help Jin and Mismas so he can focus on defeating Robozilla. Nene gets worried but knows she is too weak to help, so she runs off while Iska charges in and evades all its attacks. Just as he jumps to attack its core, it starts powering up to blast him, so Sisbel plays back a sandstorm that previously happened in its exact spot to distract it. As soon as she gives Iska the signal, he attacks and finally destroys its core. However, the astral spirit trapped in its core escapes and captures Sisbel. By then, Nene had already met up with Jin and Mismas before rushing to evacuate the locals. Iska once again manages to fight, but the astral spirit quickly overpowers him. Thankfully, Alice shows up and uses her abilities to force it back. However, after she holds it down and helps Iska get close enough to deal some damage, the astral spirit breaks free and powers up its core for a powerful blast. Iska immediately reminds Alice of the skill she used against Nebulous, so she conjures up the ice flower and blocks the blast. Regardless, the astral spirit starts reciting a spell in a weird language and unleashes a god-level art that almost turns both of them to pixie dust. Iska gets pissed off because it's destroying the entire city, and Alice also agrees that they have to stop it at all costs. However, since it's already so powerful, she suggests putting their differences aside again, and Iska agrees to this. As they charge in, the spirit uses the same god-level spell to attack, but they manage to evade and block every blast until they get close enough to unleash one of theirs. Using Alice's astral art and the power of Iska's swords, they release a blast strong enough to counter that of the astral spirit, and after pouring all their energy into it, they finally win, and Sisbel regains her freedom. While Jin and the others feel relieved, the Senate gets disappointed and immediately starts cooking up another plan. Back in Alsamira, Alice gets flustered from being so close to Iska, and as she reminds him that they are enemies, Sisbel wakes up and asks what kind of relationship they both have. Alice immediately denies knowing him, but Sisbel knows something is up and asks for the truth. After Alice insists that she doesn't know him, Iska agrees with her, so Sisbel grabs Iska's hand and says he will become her knight in shining plot armor when she becomes queen. Shocked, Alice tells Iska to reject her obviously deluded sister, but then he hears Mismas calling his name and runs off to avoid them. While he reunites with Jin and the girls, Nameless and Rizia discuss what happened and wonder why the Emperor is not back yet. Around the same time, Salinger makes it to a nice tree miles away from the sovereignty and suddenly notices a familiar presence before getting excited to see Yoon, who then claims to have exciting news. The next day, Miliver summons Elle to the throne room and says she already knows that she leaked Sisbel's location before asking if she is the real Elle. Elsewhere in the palace, Rin is waiting for Alice, who is currently with Iska in the neutral city. She tells him to act like they are strangers in front of anyone from the sovereignty, including Sisbel, and he agrees. When she suddenly admits that keeping a secret with him is fun, he asks why she seems so excited. She then denies feeling that way, but being so close to his face makes her flustered, so she turns away and decides to head home before her kitty starts dripping. Will Iska achieve his dream for world peace and finally crack Alice? Comment part 2 to find out, and don't forget to leave, like, and subscribe for more recaps like this.